I'll also be taping for backup, just to be sure.
Siete adesso, you are
I'll
in
be
the
taping
recording.
just the audio, just for backup. I trust technology
Stiamo
up to a point.
registrando, vedete la scritta? Sì.
For now, meeting transcripts are only available to...
Recording and transcription.
Ok.
Great. Okay, great, thanks. Well, thank you for finding the time.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I hope the weather is nice in California.
Yeah.
I have I have your edition, and I have my old.
Oh, yes, I know them both.
My third edition that I had for a while. So now I reread it in Italian, which was a real pleasure.
Right, and have you seen the anniversary edition, the American anniversary edition?
Only online. I've not seen the paper one.
Like,
Beautiful. It uses the yin yang character on the third edition.
Right.
Yeah. But this is got beautiful printing. The quality of the printing is quite
it's very beautiful. The whole layout, I love it.
Yeah. So I'll get to it. I have about 10 questions. I hope that if you have the time for all of them, if you are out of time, no issue. But
well, I have about an hour, so that should be plenty.
Great. The first question that comes to mind is that half a century after its publication, I wanted to ask you what you consider to be the most enduring legacy of the Tao of Physics in the dialogue between Western science and Asian philosophies.
Well, over the years, with the success of the book, I've had many discussions with people from all walks of life. And I was very surprised, not only by the success of the book, and of course I was very happy about that, but I was very surprised by the strong emotional resonance that people felt when they read the book. And for a while, I didn't understand that. And then I realized that the reason for this strong resonance has been that this change of worldview or change of paradigms that I describe in the book as having happened in physics, the change from a mechanistic worldview to a holistic and ecological view, is something that not only happened in physics, but is happening now in all the sciences and in society at large. And so again and again, I heard from people, I heard them tell me, you have expressed something that I have felt for a long time and couldn't put into words. And I can't tell you how often people told me, this book has changed my life. So this is very unusual. And what they meant, I think, is that it has helped them to become part of a broader community embracing a new worldview, a worldview which I now call a systemic view of life. And the emergence of this coherent worldview, and also the relationship to Eastern philosophies and to spirituality, I think that's the enduring legacy. Not so much the details and the detailed quotations that I use, but the fact that there is a coherent worldview that is now emerging. And I believe that this is the key characteristic of our era. And it happened first in physics, but it's now happening in the other sciences and in society at large.
And yet, quantum physics today also is more studied and widespread than before. However, society, it seems, even though it is more widely understood, still seems often to reason in Newtonian terms. I was wondering if you agree with this and
Yeah,
why the cultural leap has not taken place yet in meaningful ways for quantum physics in integrating in society.
I think that is true. That if you look, for instance, at medicine, doctors and hospitals and the pharmaceutical industry basically see the human body as a machine and illness as some piece in the machine being wrong, which has to be exchanged or repaired chemically or through surgery. Now, this is today, this is not the view of all of medicine. There's a very strong so-called holistic health movement that has very different views. But the mechanistic view is very persistent. Also, if you look at management, managers often think of their organization as some kind of machine that can be fine-tuned. They several years ago, quite a few years ago, they had this term, engineering, re-engineering the design of a company, and I think it is strong largely because it has been around for a long time and people have invested in it very heavily, intellectually, financially, in terms of their values. Imagine if you are a university professor in his 50s or 60s, and you have written a very successful textbook in your field, in a very narrow, specialized field, embracing this mechanistic perspective. If you were to change to the new paradigm, you would have to rewrite your textbook. And you don't want to do that. You have to rewrite all your courses. You'd have to restructure the academic departments and so on. So there has been a lot of investment, let alone in the corporate world. Now we have a grotesque situation where corporations, especially the energy corporations, have the destruction of the planet as their business model. I mean, it's grotesque. And they hold on to it because they have invested financially. They don't want to lose their investments. So I think it's an emotional investment, an intellectual, emotional, and financial investment. And I should add that this change from the mechanistic to the ecological worldview is, as I said, I believe it's the key characteristic, the defining characteristic of our era, but it's not a smooth change. After the Tao of Physics, I wrote another book called The Turning Point, and this was in the early 1980s. And I was very optimistic. I had this image of a declining culture and a rising culture. Some editions of the book even had that graph on the cover. And I saw it as a smooth transition, but it has not been a smooth transition. In my life, I've seen scientific revolutions, but also backlashes, counter movements, entrenchments in the old worldview. So it has been a rocky road, a rocky journey. And I think the change is an evolutionary change of our global culture and cannot be prevented by short-term political activities. But the transition process can be rough, and it's not a smooth journey.
Would you care, just as a follow-up, would you care to expand a little more about this specific moment of the rocky road that it has been your existence, where we have reached the point that the prison of the geometry that we have created in our own mind leads to such destructive plans. So
Yeah.
what do you
Well,
think?
let's go back to the 1970s when the Tao of Physics was published. I was part of and have been part of a global network of what was called the counterculture in the 1960s. And then there was a movement called the New Age movement in the 1970s. And these were very idealistic movements of a new vision of the world, a new spirituality, new values, new ways of life, liberated sexuality, use of psychedelic drugs. And these movements, what they were lacking was a political dimension. Now, of course, in the 1960s, there were a lot of political movements, the Prague Spring, the Civil Rights Movement, the student movements, the Paris May 68, and so on. But this new age movement was apolitical. Then in the 1980s, it acquired a political dimension with the Green Movement. And so the German Green Party came to power in 1983, and then the movement spread around the world. And so by the end of the 1980s, well, there was another thing. There was the Gorbachev phenomenon in 1986. And by the end of the 1980s, I really thought, and I wrote some articles about that now we have reached this turning point. Now we have all the pieces to live a different life and organize society differently. And then came something which nobody had expected, and that was the information technology revolution. And it increased the interconnectedness of the world, but at the same time, it generated a new kind of capitalism, a global capitalism, focusing on making money and having sophisticated machines, computers programmed in such a way that whenever there was a choice between making more money or honoring other human values, such as health, social justice, economic equality, and so on, the computers would always decide to invest in making more money. And so there was a new kind of materialism that emerged. The key word was globalization. That was a magical term that everybody used. And of course, globalization has many useful and beneficial aspects. Our conversation right now is part of it. The fact that we can communicate, digitally like this and in images is something quite extraordinary. However, there has been a corporate and economic globalization which has been extremely harmful. And when you talk about the alternative vision of reality that I have been part of, it took us a whole decade to cope with this globalization. And I think by the end of the 1990s, with the WTO convention in Seattle and the big demonstrations and the emergence of a global civil society, by the end of the 1990s, we were back to where we were in the late 1980s. And so I think you could say that the movement of which the Tao of Physics was part of, and I myself have been part of, created a vision of an alternative future. There have been several global meetings in the Southern Hemisphere called the World Social Forum, and they had the slogan, "Another world is possible." And that is a global vision. And you could also say that the Tao of Physics was part in the very early days of that global vision. That also, I would say, is its legacy.
Absolutely. Agree 100%. How do you see?
I would like to read to you the very last paragraph of the book. Now, the anniversary edition has, postscripts and so on, but the original epilogue. Let me just see.
My third edition might be the same.
Yeah. Okay. So I end the book by saying, I believe that the worldview implied by modern physics is inconsistent with our present society, which does not reflect the harmonious interrelatedness we observe in nature. To achieve such a state of dynamic balance, a radically different social and economic structure will be needed, a cultural revolution in the true sense of the word. So I already sort of, this to me today sounds like a manifesto, and so this is also the legacy of the Tao of Physics, I think.
At the same time, in 1981, 1982, I was living in the States at the time as a 16-year-old boy exchange student. So I speak of direct experience in seeing how Reagan transformed and gave fuel to the me generation, which seems to have run in parallel to the alternative world that you described, and has produced all kinds of horrors throughout the decades that followed. So I just wonder now, September 2025, if we can describe this parallel battle between an alternative view and the me generation of the geometric thinking, the mechanicistic thinking.
Well, I think now, I think the alternative movement is much stronger now, and it is global, it is very powerful, but at this very moment, as we speak, it has gone underground, and there is a new rise of fragmentation, of nationalism, of violence and war, which is very tragic. And I know that it will be a transitory stage, but it is extremely painful today.
I'm glad to hear that you think that it's transitory. So your view is that these are cycles and we'll get out of it.
Yes, and evolutionary movement like this shift of paradigms are larger and stronger than short-term political actions.
Thanks for the hope. I appreciate it. But in getting back to the quantum theory, then to go back to the mentality of the Cartesian separation between observer and observed, how do you think, to bring it back to the science, how do you think that this perspective, how might this perspective transform our everyday perception of reality if we were able to allow quantum theory to dissolve this separation between observer and observed?
Well, after the Tao of Physics, in my discussions with so many people, I heard again and again that similar changes of paradigms were happening in other sciences. And that led me to expand my focus from physics to medicine, to biology, to the management of human organizations, and so on. And quite soon, when I did that, I realized that the problems and issues I now became interested in all had something in common. They all had to do with life, with individual human organisms, in healthcare, for instance, with, psychology, economics, management. It all has to do with life. But of course, biology, ecology, these are the life sciences. And so in the mid-80s, I actually left my research in physics and turned towards the life sciences. And I spent several decades developing a synthesis of a new systemic view of life that has been emerging at the forefront of science. So in the beginning of this transition, I still thought that quantum physics could be a model for a new economics, for a new medicine, and so on. So this is really what your question is about. And my answer is that quantum physics has a very important historical role as being the first science where this dramatic shift has happened, and it happened in the most dramatic way. But quantum physics cannot be used to guide us in our lives, because physics has nothing to say about life. However, this systemic view of life is a view that is completely consistent with the view of matter as an interconnected network of relationships that emerged from quantum physics. So we have a network, we have networks within networks, we have the web of life, as it is often called, but it has a slightly different dynamic, and there are different patterns of organization than those in quantum physics.
And this brings us to the founding of the Center for Eco-Literacy that you have done, as you were saying. And so I was just wondering how are systems thinking and the insights of the Tao of Physics connected to today's environment and climate urgencies?
Well, they are connected because we see the same interconnectedness that quantum physicists experienced. We see them in the life sciences. I have written several books, as you know, developing this synthesis of the systems view of life. The last one is called, in the English edition, is actually called The Systems View of Life. And I co-authored it with an Italian friend of mine, biochemist Pierluigi Luisi, and who tragically died just a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yes, he was very, very influential on my thinking. He was a big mentor, a brilliant colleague, and a close friend.
Sorry to hear.
So I think with sadness about him. But to come back to the book, I have recently, after publishing this book, we published this in 2014, quite a while ago, and I've come to find a language to summarize this systemic understanding of life in terms of 4 principles of life. And they are systemic principles of organization. And here they are. Life organizes itself in networks. And this is the link to quantum physics. But these networks are quite different. And the living networks are inherently regenerative, creative, and intelligent. And so these qualities do not exist in the non-living world. So quantum physics has nothing to say about the continuous regeneration of life, about the creativity inherent in all life, and about the intelligence inherent in all life.
Which sort of brings me naturally to the next question, which talks about this in a way, because after the mechanicistic models of the Industrial Revolution, we then entered a new technological dynamic shaped by the algorithms, the servers, and now artificial intelligence. Do you think that it's yet another conceptual prison, or is it an opportunity for transformation in society and in daily life?
Well, it is. I think it is both. It may turn into a prison, and it depends largely for what purpose AI is used. Currently, if you look at the various applications, you will see that most of them are implemented for the purpose of making more money, of streamlining production processes, so-called efficiency, and this focus on money is deadly. And this artificial intelligence is very different from the natural intelligence inherent in all life. Living intelligence, which is part of all living systems, is always tacit and is organically, biologically embedded, and its main quality is the ability to be in the world, to move around in the world, to survive in it, to evolve in it. That is common to all living beings. And in the human realm, this includes abstract thinking, mathematical models, algorithms, and so on. But in terms of the broader vision of life, this mathematical dimension of intelligence is a sideline, or is as my friend Francisco Varela said, it's icing on the cake. It's not the main purpose of living intelligence. So when we increase the applications of AI, there is the danger that they actually interfere with our living intelligence, with our way of living. Just think for a moment that we live in a society where making money is considered more important than human well-being. Not always, but very often. And in making money and maximizing making money, we often destroy the natural environment on which our survival depends. So if you were to look at it from the outside, my friend Pierluigi Luisi had an essay where he talked about the little green man coming from Mars and looking at the Earth and at civilization. And a civilization that values making money more than human well-being, and in doing so destroys the natural environment, cannot be called very intelligent. So there is a clash between artificial intelligence and living intelligence, and we have to be very careful about that.
But just as a follow-up, then I wanted to get back to the Tao of Physics because this is so fascinating. So you believe that we are still in control, and that in a way we are still in time to decide how to use artificial intelligence. I'm thinking of Marshall McLuhan that says that once the technology arrives, it alters the way in which society communicates, regardless of what society does with that medium. But I'm wondering if you think that instead we still are on time with artificial intelligence to stop the negative impacts that you say could be brought about in our own intelligence.
I do think so, but I'm not an expert in artificial intelligence, and I've kept largely away. Although, it is so embedded in all the technologies we use that, you can't say I don't do artificial intelligence. We're all involved in it. But I do.
The transcript of this conversation probably is with AI also.
Yeah, I do believe that we will not be overrun by it, although our communications, of course, have changed. Yeah. Just think of in the old days when you had a dinner party and you invited some friends over, and you had animated conversations, then very often in the conversation, you would touch on something and not remember something or not know something, and that would be okay. People would say, "Oh, I don't remember," or "I don't know." Today that doesn't happen because everybody have their phones and they look it up right away and they
Or the watch even.
right. So communication has changed.
Absolutely. I wanted to bring you back now to the Tao of Physics. It was after this fascinating journey into how it connects to today through eco-literacy. But in such way to
I'm sorry,
be able to bridge.
frozen. Couldn't hear
Can,
you.
can you hear me?
Yeah, but with
Can you hear me?
problems. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me now? Is it okay?
Yes.
Better. Now I wanted to go back to the Tao of Physics and to the bridge that it created between so-called Western thinking or Western science and Asian philosophy. And because one question that arises is if mysticism cannot be learned from books, as you imply in the Taoist physics, doesn't explaining Asian philosophy through Western scientific category risk reducing its essence and make it more rather than less difficult to learn it?
Well, if the explanation were purely intellectual and analytical, I think I would agree with you that this risks making it even more difficult. But I I think I can truly say that when I wrote the Tao of Physics, I was engaged not only intellectually, but also emotionally and experientially. And I think that comes through in the book. And this is part of why people had this very strong emotional reaction to the book. And I also can tell you that I often met people who were very moved in meeting me and sometimes broke out into tears. And it was embarrassing for me, you know. And it was because of this involvement. I can also say that when I discuss the parallels between physics and Eastern mysticism, to some extent, I have experienced these parallels at a very deep level. And so it has been much more than a theoretical analysis. And therefore, I think it didn't keep people away or make it more difficult for them to experience mystical traditions, but on the contrary, inspired and encouraged them. And this is also part of the general cultural trend. In the 1960s or 1970s, if you worked for a company and said, I can't come to a meeting because I have my yoga class or my meditation class or my Qigong class, uh, people would have laughed and would have thrown you out. Today, this is standard, standard practice. So the engagement in the practice of spirituality has become much broader.
Yeah, absolutely. Although, and this is an impromptu question because I've been writing about it in the past. Today, the reason why some people, especially in the so-called West, engage in Asian philosophical practices like yoga and meditation seems to be aimed at, again, a very materialistic gain, like managers who meditate in order to be more efficient, people who do yoga so that they don't age so much and so that they are still competitive sexually, etc. So I'm wondering if somehow, and it's a question I had later on, but it is connected to a question I wanted to ask you. Many readers have interpreted the Tao of Physics sometimes in a sort of excessively mystical way or in a pop cultural key. And I was wondering if you agree, and which misunderstandings still surprise you and of your own book, and how can they be avoided?
Yeah, well, I agree that this has happened, but for me, this is all the past now, because for the last few decades, I've been involved in this systemic understanding of life, which is also science-based, but also has a spiritual grounding. And so these misinterpretations, I think, happened in the 1970s, maybe 1980s, but this is really not a current concern of mine now.
Yeah, no, not of yours, but it's true that some of the right-wing groups have hijacked New Age in America, for
Yeah, that's
example.
true. Yeah, that's true.
So I'm thinking of the shaman who rushes through the Capitol, and in a way that has happened in a part of society. So it's also true that it has not the message of the original message of unity, I suppose, that the Tao of Physics brings doesn't seem to have, seems to have also been distorted in American culture more than European culture.
Yeah, on the other hand, you could say that the huge youth movements now, which arose mostly in connection with climate change and the climate catastrophe, the sunrise movements and Fridays for Future, and also in Italy there are many of these movements, or the effect of our Senator Bernie Sanders, and or the effects of the Occupy movement some quite a few years ago. These are all movements of people who see the world as an interconnected network, who want to preserve the beauty of the earth and want to preserve and protect life. And I think they're much stronger than the right-wing exploitations of New Age spirituality.
Excellent message. Thank you for clarifying your view. It's quite encouraging. Um, so, in the systemic view that you have developed, but connecting it back to the work that you have discussed also in the Tao of Physics of the opposition in Western mentality between Parmenides and Heraclitus of being and becoming, do you think that Asian philosophies propose an integrations, and what can we learn today from this inclusive paradigm in the scientific, cultural, and what you call the life fields of how to integrate the philosophy of being and the philosophies of becoming as identified by Parmenides and Heraclitus?
Yeah, you will remember that in the Tao of Physics, I call Heraclitus the Greek Taoist, because he has this dynamic view, and that is a view I think that we can learn. We can learn that uh, underneath every structure, if you associate being with a structure, underneath every structure there is a process, or there are sets of processes, and structure emergence out of underlying processes. So I think the dynamic view is something that we can learn. You may remember that in the Tao of Physics, I identify two big themes that are themes of modern physics and themes of Eastern mysticism. One is the fundamental interconnectedness of all things. And the second one is the essentially dynamic nature of the universe. And both are represented in the system's view of life. Life is a process and life is a network. But I could also tell you, can also tell you that actually that's an interesting idea. that I haven't thought about before when you mentioned Parmenides and Heraclitus, being and becoming. In the system's view of life, I will go on a little tangent if you don't mind.
Please, happy to hear it.
So in the system's view of life, the defining characteristic of a living system is metabolism. My friend and mentor Lynn Margulis used to say, she was a very brilliant microbiologist, and she used to say, if it metabolizes, it's alive. If it doesn't metabolize, it's not alive. Metabolism is the continuous flow of energy and matter through a network of chemical reactions. And so it has these two aspects, the flow aspect and the network aspect. Now, the network is a structure and the flow aspect is a process. So in a sense, this is a reflection of the ancient dichotomy of being and becoming, which is unified in this process of metabolism.
Excellent.
I should write something about this
Well,
someday.
now we have it on transcript.
Yeah, right. Great.
Well, this I will have just one more question because I don't want to
Okay.
steal and an easy one. I don't want to steal.
No, but this was very nice. I really enjoyed that because it was a novel idea.
Yes, metabolism. I'll re-go over it in the transcript. No, a very simple one, just to see if you were to rework now, considering everything that you have done since the Tao of Physics, if you were to rework it today. I know this is a new edition that came out, of course, so you had a chance, but which insights would you preserve and which would you revise in light of your own itinerary as a thinker and in light also of the digital revolution, etc., and the new scientific discoveries? What would you preserve and what would you revise?
Well, I think I have, as you say, I have done this to some extent because I have a large afterword called The New Physics Revisited. And the main change is that in the actual original text, I place a lot of emphasis on the bootstrap philosophy and the bootstrap theory. And in the history of modern physics, this has taken a backseat. And as I say in the afterword, I believe it will come back. But at the moment, the dominant theory is string theory in particle physics, which is very elegant but has huge problems. And I discussed this to quite some extent in the afterword. But I would integrate this into the book, this shift of emphasis and my own position vis-a-vis that shift. I don't think I would change anything in the description of Eastern mysticism or description of the parallels. And I can tell you that I have not read the book in a long time. I read the new chapters, of course, I wrote them and revised them and so on. But in preparation for our interview, because you told me you read the entire Italian edition, so I leafed through the book and I was really impressed by the beauty of these quotations from Eastern mysticism, from Buddhists like Ashwagosha and Nagarjuna and these people. That is just exquisitely beautiful. So I wouldn't have to change any of that.
I don't think you should. I don't think you should. I just wanted to see if you had something, but I found it as inspirational as ever and as useful as ever. I've not told you I've been living in India for 15 years and I've done meditation and yoga and all that. So you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
But as someone who is in the choir, I found it so refreshing also to refine the connection also between Confucianism, Taoism, and this Unitarian idea, systemic idea of bringing together the Vedas with Buddhism. And it's very important today, even in Asia, where there is so much division, to remember that actually there is a unity even within different Asian philosophies, as you have done. So.
Well, it has been a great pleasure to talk to you, and I hope we meet in the flesh sometime.
So do I.
Right
So do
off.
I. If you ever come to Italy, sometimes I'm here. And by the way, I used to know a Capra in Vicenza, where I'm now, a Count
Oh,
Capra.
really?
Who knows if you are from Vicenza
Yeah.
originally?
A cugino.
There was a Count friend of my parents, Count Capra, from Vicenza. So I don't know if the family is from there.
Very good. Is there a castle?
No, I don't. I think the castle must be gone by now, so you can't claim it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. When are you going to publish that, or when is La Repubblica?
I'm going to send it tomorrow, and I hope that over the next few days, and Daniele will have it, but I'll send you a screenshot right away as soon as it comes out.
Bene, grazie mille e
Grazie
auguri.
mille, grazie ancora, arrivederci.
Grazie a lei, arrivederci.